Okay, this is working. Okay, yeah. So I basically made few modifications to the whole model, and they're not like modifications to the model, but it's just like changing the center of mass and the pivot of the objects. Okay. This documentation folder. I only have this picture for now, but I'll add like proper documentation soon. So basically, we have four different types of pieces. We have the H for horizontal, the medium horizontal, V for the medium vertical, B for the big piece, the winning piece, and S for the small piece, and E stands for empty. And you can basically see how they're set up here. And the grid is a 4x5 grid, and you can see I said the pivot over here, the blue dot here is the pivot, and this basically shows all the pivots are at the bottom left. So whenever we're talking about in a grid and we say this cell is a horizontal cell, that means the cell right next to it, adjacent to it, must also be a horizontal cell because it takes up two blocks. E's are for empties, V is for the vertical. If I say this is a vertical cell here, that means the cell above it must also be the same vertical cell. And it's basically the same thing for B. It takes up 4 cells, right? Okay. And I made a prefab game board. So anytime you want to make a new level, you just drag this game board out into the scene, and you go into Windows, Custom, Level Creator, and this is basically what you're going to use to create the levels, right? You can see this corresponds to the grid. We have the 4x5 grid, right? So this is an empty board. We can just say set default layout. So this is the layout you gave me the whole scene with, right? You can see this corner cell is B, which means all of these on the right are also B because they're the big cells, right? It's basically synonymous with like using a unique number for each one of them to identify it, right? And I'm basically using colors and letters here. And you can see it takes in a game board. You can drag this game board here, and if you hit create board, you can see it creates this layout on the board, right? And you can change it. For example, let's say I don't want two smalls here, I want a horizontal, right? I just change this S to a H, and you can see this changes the color here. And if I just say create board, you can see this changes to a horizontal. Similarly, you can just put E. You can see if I put E here, this also turns into an E because these are the same piece, right? So if I hit create board again, you can see this disappears. I'll change it back to what it was. Basically, you can create, let me clear the layout, and if you want to create it from scratch, we have a B here in the middle. Also, let me show you some special cases. For example, I can't put a B here because there's no cells here that it can occupy, right? You can see it just changes to an E once you edit out. However, I can't put a B here, or even, I can't put it here because this is a subcell of that. So if I just do clear visual layout, oops, B, and then we had a V here for vertical. We had two verticals here, had one horizontal, H, and then two small ones, S, and then two small ones here. And then if I clear the board and upgrade it, you can see we got that back. You can see that if I wanted to remove this V here, I cannot, because this V is, it's a vertical cell, so this is a part of the one under it. However, I can change this to a S, in which case this turns into an empty. Okay, and then if I create the board, you can see it creates the corresponding layout here. For the gameplay, I currently just have this. Just you highlight any of your objects and then you can move it. But as you can see, they don't snap; they're kind of free moving, right? This, okay. What else? Okay. So once you get the hang of this is basically very easy. let's see. Close this, and then you can just save that as a prefab in the new level, right? You can see this has the game board script on it that does a lot of the things. The object highlighter is a prefab because you can just drag it onto your scene, and the game board or the pieces depend on this because they highlight using this object. You can see if I disable this and then go in the game, this is for a debugging purpose, and you go in the console, it says your scene does not have an active object highlighter. This will cause null reverse exceptions, right? Okay. Close this, and this will give you the same message if I don't have any board. I believe. Maybe? Maybe not? No, I guess not. But if you don't have the board, there's no game, right? Yeah, this is where I am so far. Next, I'm gonna be tackling the snapping and winning basically when you have this all the way over here, this big block you win. And the other custom tools, the layout helper, I use this tool to set the pivots of the objects because they're all set at the origin, which is 0, 0, 0, and that was very hard to work with if I wanted to move the objects linearly, right? The create targets, I used it for some debugging purposes, and I'll probably remove these whenever I'm giving you the whole project. Yeah, that's basically it for now. I should be able to get done with it in one more day. Okay, well, I guess I'll talk to you soon.